So, I'm back. Welcome to Quests and Quills, and I've been away for a while. I'll go into details about why that is as we get into the video. I just want to get started really quickly. In this video, I'm going to build two new boards for the Quests and Quills workshops, and I'm really excited about these. I printed all of this stuff off about 4 or 5 months ago now. It's from a company called Fabricator's Lair on my mini factory. I'll put a link in the description below. I paid for all of this. None of this was kind of sent over for free, so there's no freebies here. This was all paid for by myself and then printed on my Bamboo Lab A1. First thing I need to do before I can start laying it out on the boards to get a feel for the space is to actually work out what is what. When I was printing it off, I put it all together, so I know everything's there, but now it's all been jumbled up in a box, and I know the grey stuff goes together, I know the peach stuff goes together, but the white stuff kind of, there's bits for this bit, there's bits for this bit. There's two different sets here. In fact, there's three, because this set kind of goes like that, but then I've printed it twice, so it'll form like a ring, and then this is a big kind of cathedral style thing. I just love the Warhammer 40K Gothic style to these. I'm looking forward to putting the boards together. It's going to be a fractured landscape, I think, so I'm going to use some foam to build it up with a big split down the middle across both boards. That's the plan. But first, I need to sort out what's going on here, so I'm going to go into a time lapse. I'll give you a bit more of an update whilst we're going through the time lapse, and then I'll see you on the other side for some more foam work. I'll see you in a bit. Okay, quick update on why it's taken so long to get this video finished. Firstly, I've had a holiday in between, which kind of about three and a half weeks, which just added a load of time. It's the school holidays. But also, the last few videos have performed so poorly, it's just been one of those things where I've had to kind of drag myself mentally through this video. It takes twice as long to film anything as it does to just build it normally. And then when YouTube doesn't show the video to the people who have subscribed, that's really frustrating. So it took me a while to get my head back into kind of gear. I've got some plans for how I'm going to kind of change things up moving forward after this video. I'll talk about that a little bit later, but I thought you might want a little bit of an update as to why it's taken so long. Okay, taking a quick pause at this point, because what I've realised is that looking at the board as it's set out like this, there's just not going to be enough room for both things to be on the same board, so I think it's going to end up too crowded. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave one structure on this board, take the spare pieces that I've printed, put those away for now because I can do another board with those later, and then I'll try and sort out this bit. So this is what they will look like when they are built. Like I say, really impressive, amazing work from Fabricator's Lair. And they, again, they're all modular, so I could take this top layer off or this top layer and put it on the floor and it would just work as a thing. There is this cool stained glass. I'm going to try some coloured resin in there to fit into there. So I'm going to do that when everything's painted. And we'll do that and glue it in. But I think I'm going to keep this separate for now because I've got, like I say, I'll paint it up, but I want to use some resin. That's going to be hard to do if it's already fitted in. And then we've got this one over here. There's loads of play space. What I'm going to do first, before I do anything with the positioning, is I'm going to take all of these floor tiles and stick them together and batten them underneath, put some buttresses under there. So I might just use lollipop sticks or something like that, just to add some strength to them so that when they are on, because as always with these things, I have to be able to box them away to take them to workshops. And so for this one, this layer will be stuck down, that will be fine. This layer will come off, and the same over here. I will build it with this bottom layer in, and then the top layer will all come off, and I'll try and glue that together in a way that holds together so that I can pack it away and it will stay strong, and then I can just put it back on at the end rather than having to fiddle with everything. Because I wanted a cracked kind of earth base, I cut out a slab of XPS foam. This is actually an inch thick, so I did 2 layers, so because I just wanted it to be high enough that when you put a figure in there it won't be able to see over the top, just to give it a bit more cover. And I drew this out on the XPS foam and then just used a handheld foam cutter to cut through it because I wanted it to look like it had shifted. So this way I can just pull them apart slightly and it will look like the ground has cracked rather than having to do 2 different cracks that won't match up. Right, okay, so everything's dried now. What I've done for this board, because I don't want such deep cracks in this one, I'm going to go, I think, for a bit more of a kind of a lava flow effect through there. So I've gone for more narrow cracks and just a shallower foam on top. So I stuck that down with kind of a no nails grab adhesive kind of thing. That's just drying now. Checked where everything's going to sit. That's going to sit nicely on there. This one has all set now. The expanding glue is all firmed up, and again I'm starting to think about where these bits can go on there. So the next step is pretty much going to be sculptor moulding over the top of this. I'm not going to go too thick with the sculptor mould because it doesn't need a huge amount, it's just more for protection than anything. Then I'm going to use cat litter, so drying like non-clumping, very cheap, very gravelly cat litter to give it kind of that wasteland, almost surface of the moon kind of texture, which I think will work really well, particularly with this one. Where the building I think is going to overlap a little bit here, I'm going to use some rock molds that I've got, you know, just the generic rock molds, just to kind of build out this a little bit, just to give it a bit more structure underneath those, because they look a bit weird sticking out in the middle. But I think by putting them there, it gives me much more playable space around this side, which is important as well. I found an old 3D printed ornithopter kind of proxy that I'm going to try and embed in this one a little bit. I've also got some little bits here that come from this same set, so like a fallen statue, we've got some concrete blocks and some anti-tank kind of things, so I'm going to try and find space for those in there maybe. They might work better on this one, I don't know, we'll have a look. But what I'm going to do, first sculpt mould everything, and then get the cat litter on it. We're at that point again in the UK where it is our 3 days of summer and it is ridiculously warm in here at the minute. So I'm just going to go into a time lapse whilst I put the sculpt mould on it, and then we'll see how hot and sweaty I get and whether I, you know, might need to go for a shower before I do the next bit. Okay, right, it is really hot, so I've even got the door open and everything. It's just too hot to be doing too much. I have put a black border around the edge of the boards. Use the laser cutter just to cut these out of black ply that black MDF that I'd got for the laser cutter. These have all been stuck on. It just gives it a much nicer edge and stops the kids from being able to pick at the foam. It's much flatter, and when it's painted that'll look even better. I've glued down the models onto the foam using some no-nails, so I'm just waiting for that to dry. I've primed the models before I do anything because I wanted to make sure that all the underside and everything was already primed black. That way it won't matter once it's all built, once it's all sculptor molded. I'm not going to try and reach under there to prime everything. In a minute, once all this is dried, I'm going to sculpt mold the whole thing. Now, instead of just using plain sculptor mold, I bought some of this cement colour pigment, which is black, and I'm going to mix that in with the sculptor mold. So when I go into the sculptor mold bit, you'll see me mixing that in with it. The idea being that that should make the sculptor mold nice and black all the way through, so that if it chips, it doesn't matter. You know, I've tried paint before. I tried mixing acrylic paint in with the sculptor mold, and it doesn't really work. It goes a little bit grey, but not really very well. This stuff, I've seen Jeremy from Black Magic Craft, I think it was, he used iron oxide before. Iron oxide for hobbyists is really expensive. This cement colour is really cheap because it's for cement. It's the same stuff basically, it's an oxide pigment, so hopefully mixing that in with the sculptor mould, once it sets, if it chips off it'll still be black. It won't matter, you won't see it because the ground cover is going to be kind of black and grey and all of that kind of stuff. Especially on the shallow board where we're going for more like a lava flow look rather than the moon rock look on this one. Right, okay, so it's been a while since I started putting this stuff on here. It's been over a month actually, because I just ran out of time. I've been on a couple of holidays, I've been busy with work, and during that time I've kind of struggled to come back to this build. And I think part of the problem is I think I'm trying to do too much in one video. So for a start, I've moved the other board away to one side. It's going to have different ground terrain. It's just going to be a whole different set of skills. So I'm going to do that as a different video rather than trying to cram everything in. I'm going to focus on this board and try and get this one done. And I think part of the other reason why I was struggling to come back is I just wasn't enthused about sticking another building on a board and being done with it. I want to try and add a little bit more to it. I love the kind of Eric's Hobby Workshop stuff where he sticks so much stuff on, you kind of think, well, this is you know, sticking too much, this is going to be rubbish. And then all of a sudden, bang, at the end, it looks amazing. Now, I don't have anywhere near as big a bits box as Eric's got, or any of those kind of masters, but I've got bits that I've printed off over the years that have just kind of been sat there because they looked cool when I printed them off, but they've not really done anything with them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to finish this board off by just sticking a load of greeblies on there, just little bits that kind of add a little bit of storytelling to it. Before I then get into the painting of it. So I'm just going to work my way around. You know, I've got things like old Space Marines that have come in the Warhammer Alliance packs and things like that, and I can just embed just bits like that into the ground. I think it'll just give it more interest. These old yogurt pots and some more of these pipes. Now, what I've learned in the past with these things is that they don't take paint very well at all because they're really shiny plastic. So I'm going to do two things differently this time. I'm going to take a piece of sandpaper to them, and I'm going to give them a key. Not much, just a bit of a key on there. And then I'm going to plaster all of them with kind of a sand and Mod Podge mix, or I might just use, you know, I've already got something that I can't remember what it's called now, but I got it from a modelling shop. Bear with me. Here it is, yeah, sand texture gel. So this is the Galleria sand texture gel. I'm just going to coat it with that because that should stick really well to it once it's been sanded, and then the paint will stick to that, and that will give it kind of a really rusty and corroded texture as well. So I'm just going to go around, I'm just going to hot glue gun everything in for now, stick it down. When it comes to kind of really sticking it properly, I'll go back and add more of the sculptor mold, and that'll build around the bottom, and that'll stick it much better. I've still got the ornithopter that I want to kind of bury in there as well. I'll probably do that. But I just want to give it a little bit more storytelling, I think, than just being a building on a board that looks fine, and it will look cool when it's painted, but I just want to give it a little bit more, I think, and hopefully this will re-enthuse me to kind of get this board finished. So I know the video's been ages in coming out, and again, that's kind of on me. I've got an idea of how I'm going to move forward after this video, but I need to get a few things in line, but I'm thinking of looking at doing kind of a shorter weekly vlog kind of video. I've seen what Trent's done at Miscast, and it just looks awesome. So I think that might encourage me to do a little bit more rapid pace stuff. Like, instead of trying to build a whole build in one video, just do bits and bobs and kind of build it up over a series of shorter videos more regularly. So we'll see. If you think that sounds cool, leave a comment. But other than that, I'm going to go around now, stick all this stuff down. I'll stick some music on the video, and you can just kind of see me sticking it down. Cool. Right, so I've been outside, I've spray painted everything. What we're going to do now is get some cat litter. This is a really cheap, gravelly kind of cat litter. Put it in the food blender, and I'm going to try and use that as a texture over the earth, over the dirt, and in the bottom of the valley as well. I might not cover every single bit of it, but I'm hoping I don't want to have to paint this. So that's why I've spray painted everything now. Then I can paint the objects, paint the buildings and things like that, but the ground I can leave as this, and any oil washes and things should really soak in nicely. So we're going to stick some of that in here, and we'll start gluing it down. I'm just going to cover bits with Mod Podge and then sprinkle it down. So let's see how it goes. Smells like cat. Okay, so we're going to Mod Podge, stick it down. See how that goes. definitely needs a bit more blending. So this is one of those things where I think I'm going to have to go back to the drawing board, which is a good learning curve, it's a good lesson. The cat litter just isn't blending as much as I would like. It's staying in big chunks, which I don't really want. I quite like this dusty stuff, but I don't want loads and loads of big bricks or big kind of stones, because it will just be too hard for miniatures to stand. It'll be too uneven. So what I want is kind of a stony looking texture, but that the miniatures can stand on without wobbling and being unbalanced. So I need to go back to the drawing board. I might go down to the shop, see if I can think of something else, a different type of cat litter maybe. I just need something that will break up. I'll have a think about it, and then I will come back with a solution. Right, okay, I've been back to the shops. I bought some of this generic, kind of really cheap Hello Kitty branded cat litter. It's much finer than the stuff. I'm not even going to try and blend this down. I've also blitzed everything, or dusted everything with kind of a brown spray paint, because that will give an element of rust to this metal when I start to dry brush it later, but also it will give a bit more texture and depth to the dirt, so that I don't have to cover everything with this stuff now. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with a bit over there. I think I'll tie it in. I think once I put oil washes over everything and different colour wash, I think it will just bring everything together anyway. So I'm not going to worry too much about that. I'll go over it with this, but in general this stuff should be a lot better. I'm not going to have to cover up every little thing with it. I'm not going to cover the walls inside the cracks. I want them to be more dirt, so that'll be dry brushed and things like that. But this has got like little purple bits in as well, which I think will give it quite a nice alien vibe maybe, if any of those make it through. I'm not sure whether they will last. It also smells of baby powder, which could be quite fun. I think it will just give it a bit of texture. And again, I might just start putting it, not necessarily everywhere, but just spreading it around here and there. Obviously trying to avoid things like the Space Marine arm I've put in and the rocks and things like that. Okay, everything's been given a black and brown dusting prime, including the ornithopter. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use one of these cellulose sponges. I'm just going to cut bits off, use some tweezers to just start dabbing on some colour onto some of the buildings and things like that. I really like the rusty look for this building. I just want a bit of a pop of colour, so I'm not going to overdo it. I'm not going to cover the whole thing, but I'm going to go for an ivory for the buildings. I kind of think, I've got this vision of in the past people approaching this vast ivory fortress in the distance that now has just been left to go to rack and ruin, but there'll still be some remnants of the ivory paint on it. Not a lot, but some. These things and the tracks and the pipe work at the back, I'm just going to leave those as they are rusty, and I'm going to go over those with some dirty down rust and things like that later on. But the buildings I'm going to do ivory. The concrete I'm going to use Vallejo concrete paint, concrete colour, just to give it a bit of a highlight. And then I'm just going to use a detail brush just to pick out like the Space Marine arm here, and there's the guy buried around here somewhere. If you can still see him, I might have covered him up by accident with the cat litter. I'll try and find him again. I can't remember where he's gone. But just to pick out those details, and then more or less I think we'll be done. I think the whole thing will need a really good grimy oil wash. Once I've put this on, once I've put the rust paint on, but we'll see how that goes when we get to it. So I'm just going to start dabbing this on and see how it looks. So I've put all the white, ivory paint on it. I've stippled that on a mix of sponge and dry brushing. The last thing I need to do to all of the metal stuff now is add some dirty down rust, which I just love this product. I know some people think it looks a bit out of scale for it, but what I'm going to try and do today to try and combat that is water it down very slightly before I apply it to the buildings, and then once it's dry, because it's a water-based medium, and once it's dry, I'm going to spritz it with the same black, grey, brown water that I used on here, and that should hopefully reactivate it slightly and let it dribble down so it gets much more natural rust kind of drips. We'll see how it works. It could completely ruin it, could look great, but we'll see how it goes. So I'm going to mix it up into two of these dirty trays. I really need to clean these out. when you're using Dirty Down Rust, I've got the normal Dirty Down Rust and the yellow rust. Always make sure you shake them properly until you can hear that click. Okay, once you can hear the ball inside clicking, because it coagulates at the moment, it clogs up, and you won't get a very good effect if it's not properly mixed. And that ball sound means it's properly mixed. So I'm going to mix it with a tiny bit of water, not a huge amount, just a tiny bit, just a few drops, just to water it down slightly. And then I'm going to dab it on with a brush, probably aiming more towards the top of the buildings, because then hopefully it will run down with the water. I might put some pigment powders on and things like that, but other than that, once I put the rust on, I'm going to do the oil wash, and I think then I'm going to call it done. We'll see what it looks like at the end, but hopefully the rust effect with the spritzing will work, so let's see. So again, trying to focus towards the top of the building, and not too much, because this is really going to brown it, so this is really going to make it rusty when it dries. This brush is perhaps a bit big, I don't know, it soaks it up too much. But what I wanted to do is just give a bit of that texture. Now, for when I was painting this, I took this top half off to stipple it and everything, but I think I'm going to leave it on for here because I think it will allow them to flow from one layer to the other a lot better. So I think I need a little bit more watering down than that. See if I can get a bit more out of here that's still in there. That might be a bit too watery. It's finding the perfect balance. As with everything, all of this is kind of experimentation. Seeing what works, what doesn't work. The beauty of the Dirty Down Rust is that it, because it's water activated, you can just wash it off afterwards. A bit like with an oil wash with white spirits. Time for an oil wash. I've mixed up some black oil paint and white spirits in here, for those who don't know. I've got changed into old clothes because it always sprays, it always flicks up, so it's just always worth using old clothes for this because it won't come out. Now I'm going to try and focus mainly on the buildings and the pipework and that. If it gets onto the groundwork, it doesn't matter, but I'm not going to give all of the ground a full oil wash because it just doesn't need it. It's dark enough anyway. It's got enough highlights and shadows and things like that in there, but the building I'm just going to wash it all over. Now normally I would wash it on and then dab it all off with kitchen roll. I haven't got any kitchen roll today. Now the beauty of oil washes is that they take a long time to dry, so I could go and get some kitchen roll and do it later on today or tomorrow, but I'm actually going to leave it on and see what it looks like when it finishes. If then in a couple of days when it's dry I decide I don't like it, I can still go in and wipe it off in areas, give it a bit more of a smoother look on the panels. But I'm going to try something a little bit different. So again, like I said, it's all about experimenting, about learning. I'm just going to leave the heavy oil wash on, and then we will see what it looks like once it's all dry. So I'm going to focus on the buildings and the pipework and see how we get on. And as always, we can just let it dribble down. Now this shouldn't, because it's not water based, it shouldn't reactivate too much of the Dirty Down Rust. But again, you can just let it wash into the recesses. You can do this with a softer brush as well. This is my oil paint brush, so this one is pretty much a dead brush now. It's really old, it's really stiff, but it does what it needs to do, rather than keep using a new brush each time. I do recommend, if you can, getting the odourless white spirits to do this with. I managed to find some, I think like Poundland or something like that in the UK, which I think has just gone bust, but certainly the one near me has just closed, but I don't know if the whole company's gone bust. But I mean, it still smells, but it doesn't quite smell as bad as normal white spirits. And then it's time for the big reveal, see what it all looks like.